An eighth grader just wrote 3 words for a 3-sentence assignment. Stinger, head, legs. That's it. That's today's episode. Welcome back to the Veteran Teacher Files. I'm the Dragon Lady. If you were with me on Monday for We Knew This Would Happen, and we did it anyways, and Wednesday for the lottery, when the COVID kids came back, you know exactly whose classroom that 8th grader is sitting in. Today's the third and final piece of that story. And this one's personal because this is my classroom. Let me back up and explain how I got here, because it's not a straight line, and honestly, it's kind of a funny story if you squint and look at it. When I left my job as a literacy coordinator, I need you to understand something. I didn't have a problem with the work. I had a problem with the site. Those are two very different things. And I think a lot of us confuse that when we're deciding whether to walk away from something. I loved being a literacy coordinator. I did not love where I was doing it. So I went looking. Option A didn't pan out. Option B didn't pan out. Option C didn't pan out. By the time I got to option D, I was not exactly feeling picky anymore. Option D was going back to a district I am not historically a huge fan of. But, and this is the part that actually mattered, it was a school I liked, in a program I believe in, dual immersion. I am a fan. I am an advocate. I will talk your ear off about dual immersion if you let me. So, the only opening they had was middle school, 7th and 8th grade. Now, I want you to sit with that for a second, because on paper, that should have terrified me. I've taught up to 6th grade. I've worked with 7th and 8th grade, even high schoolers, but that's different. That's coaching. That's popping into a room for 40, 55 minutes, not actually having my own 7th and 8th grade classroom. Not once in my career so far. And I got hired at a job fair on the spot. They saw me walk in and they already knew who I was. So here's what I told myself. Walking into a grade I've never taught before. And it's going to be okay. Because these are dual immersion students. And here's what I know, or what I knew, before I ever even met a single kid about dual immersion cohorts. They're closed. You don't get to wander in during 4th or 5th grade because you decided this year you're interested in Spanish. You're in that program from kindergarten, 1st grade if you're lucky, maybe 2nd grade if you're already coming in fluent in both languages. By 3rd grade, if you're not in already, you're not getting in. It's a locked door, which means the cohort is small and it stays together. I have 18 7th graders and 15 8th graders. That's it. That's the whole group. And I was right. I walked in armed with a theory about a program, and the theory held. But here's what I noticed that I did not have a theory prepared for. It's not just the kids who stay together in dual immersion. It's the teachers. Think about that from a teacher side for a second. If you're a dual immersion teacher, your options are kind of limited. You can't just transfer down the hall to another open position. You need another dual immersion opening at another dual immersion site. And those don't exactly grow on trees. So when I left my first dual immersion program, I went looking for another dual immersion program. And when I left that one, I tried to find another one. And instead I ended up teaching 6th grade in English for a while. But the pull has always been there. I'm an advocate, like I said. And when I went looking again, here I am, back in dual immersion. And that pattern, I think it's bigger than just me. I think it's the whole population of dual immersion teachers. Because here's what else I've noticed. Dual immersion teachers are not the ones who left during COVID and didn't come back. at least not at the 2 sites where I was working and coaching. They're not the ones who have the long-term vacancies I've been talking about for the last couple of episodes. They quarantined just like everyone else, and they dealt with everything just like everyone else. But they came back. They also didn't move around grade levels so much because, like I said, you have to have another opening at your site or at a different site. Once a dual immersion program is established, once a site has grown into it and built out its pipeline, gotten their whole staffing settled, they kind of just tend to stay and settle for a while. Now, I know there's one site that's been shuffling around, but that's because they're actively adding grades and growing the program. So that's different. That's growth. That's not churn. Here's where it gets a little eerie for me personally. The school I'm at now, I used to coach there during COVID. I left right after. Got pulled into virtual TK, which if you missed it, that was Wednesday's episode, the lottery. Go back and listen, because that's a whole story on its own. So, I walked back into this building for the first time in years, and I know about half the staff. I realized that at our first staff meeting when I was looking around. And when I stopped to actually think about which half I recognized, it's the dual immersion teachers. A few, of the English teachers, but the dual immersion program at this site is actually shrinking right now. It's kind of collapsing, but the teachers are still there. They might not be in the same grade level, and some of them aren't even teaching in Spanish anymore. Some of them are now teaching in English. But they're still there. They might have shifted around in the program, but they never left the building. Meanwhile, the English track teachers, the ones I used to also coach and work with, the ones who I was basically like a counselor and therapist for during COVID, gone. Most of them are gone. I think there's like a very small handful left. The rest of them moved to other districts, other schools, just scattered. Okay, that's the theory. And the theory held for my dual immersion classroom: stability, continuity, a cohort that came up together and mostly weathered COVID together, because there was no other door for them to walk through, and no other door for their teachers to walk through either. But I have one other class, my elective, and it's the only period all day that isn't dual immersion, because here's the thing: all my dual immersion kids need a Spanish elective. So the rest of the kids, they land with me, which means I also get a slice of the English-only population all in the same room. 28 kids. And this is where the theory falls apart. This is where I feel it. I don't feel COVID so much in my dual immersion classroom. Yeah, they're a bit behind, but I feel it in this period. I had a subcover of this class for the first time today, and that's going to be a whole separate episode, I promise you. But even before that, I already knew what I was going to be looking at, because I've spent years as an instructional coach watching this exact cohort across multiple sites. I didn't need to meet these 28 kids to know exactly what they needed. I already know. Out of 28 students, maybe half of them show a real level of care. Out of that half, maybe half of that group goes above and beyond. So we're talking a quarter of the room that actually is engaging with grade level work. And I want to be clear about something. It's not even grade level work. The curriculum I'm teaching, the curriculum I'm using, being anatomy and biology, was written for 3rd through 5th grade summer school. That's the level I'm working with my 7th and 8th graders. And it's still a stretch for most of them. And I want to head something off right here before you email me or get all nasty with me. I've worked with dyslexic students throughout my career, including in middle school. I was one of the ones who actually had to do a deep dive and select a dyslexia screener for an entire K through 12th grade site. I spent a full year researching. I'm not going to sit here and call myself an expert. I know there are people out there who know way, way more than me, but I know what dyslexia looks like. And what I'm about to read to you is not that. This is something else. I'm seeing 8th graders reading at 4th grade, 5th grade reading levels. I'm seeing handwriting I would guess belongs to a 1st grader, learning how to hold a pencil for the first time. No capitalization, no punctuation. Kids who don't write their last names anymore. And I don't even think it's them being lazy. I genuinely think some of them don't know how to spell their last names. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Here we go. I asked my 7th and 8th graders to write 3 complete sentences about one body part a bee has that a human does not. And what does the bee use that body part for? Not making this up. 3 sentences. This student wrote stinger, head, legs. That was it. Not sentences. 3 words and done. There was still more to this worksheet, by the way. But he decided that was it. That was enough for him. I had another student who I asked to please define different types of energy. Now, they had their textbook, and we had also watched a video with the captions on that I was pausing. Thermal. The student wrote heat. Okay, fine. I asked them to please write the definition. Electromagnetic. The sun. Okay, fine. And then it starts to slip. Sound. A speaker. Electrical. Guitar? But they spell it G-A-T-A-R. Guitar. And I think they were trying to write electric guitar, but instead of electric, it says electra guitar. Chemical energy. Gas. And I think this says gas. And something else that I genuinely can't read. And then for nuclear, it's just a string of letters. That doesn't even, these are just letters. This doesn't even make a word. I think the last word might be sun. I honestly can't tell you what the heck this says. This is an 8th grader who's going to high school next year. And in just a couple of years, this kid could be taking my order somewhere. This isn't the first time I've seen it either. And I want you to understand, this is not one bad group at one school. Last year, as a literacy coordinator, I supported an after-school intervention with a group of 6th graders, 20 to 25, in a room with 3 adults working in it. A 6th grade teacher, a resource teacher, and a clerk, plus myself pushing in whenever I could. And I used to pick up their notebooks and just try to read them, because part of being a coordinator was making sense of the data. So here I am looking at their pre-writing and their post-writing and trying to show growth. It was hard as heck trying to read this. I've taught 1st grade before, and my 1st graders by the end of 1st grade wrote better than the reading that I was reading by these 6th graders in this intervention room. And that was with every scaffold in place. Posters on the wall, sentence starters, us literally telling them, get up and copy the language off the wall. Copy it. And it still looked like a mess. No periods, misspelled words, no capital letters, just randomness. And that's a whole 2nd school. This elective is a 3rd school that I've worked at. 3 different schools, 3 different years, same cohort, same gaps. I'm not kidding. And I promise you, none of this is funny to me. And I want to be really honest with you, because this is what this show is for. This scares the hell out of me. Not in a dramatic doom and gloom way. In a very specific, very concrete, I'm seeing speech delays that clearly never got caught or never got support. I'm seeing kids who don't know how to sit in a classroom for 55 minutes. I'm seeing kids who don't know how to hold a pencil correctly in 8th grade. This isn't a handful of outliers. This is a pattern in the same cohort I've been tracking since kindergarten, in episode after episode, site after site. So here's where I land. And here's the thing I think ties this whole series together. Same disruption, same cohort, same years lost, but two completely different outcomes sitting in two different rooms of my own school day. My dual immersion kids came up in a closed cohort with teachers who, for reasons that had nothing to do with anyone's individual heroism and everything to do with the structure of the program itself, could not easily leave. That structural stability, even though a global shutdown was happening, even though quarantines and staffing shortages were happening, and everything else I told you about on Monday and Wednesday held, they stuck it through. My Gen Pop kids didn't have that door locked behind them. Their teachers could transfer. Their teachers could leave the profession entirely. And a lot of them did. Long-term subs cycled through, and nobody was structurally required to stay and see it through. I keep coming back to something a principal once said to me standing at a window watching kids walk to lunch. The student who gets handed a string of bad teachers year after year essentially ends up with zero education. I think what I'm watching right now in real time in my own classrooms is the flip side of that same coin. Structural stability isn't a guarantee. My dual immersion kids are still behind, but it's a floor. And when the floor isn't there, the kids just fall further than anyone standing in front of them realizes, until you're the one standing there reading a worksheet you can barely make out, doing the math on how many years until these kids actually have to be out in the real world. That's my turn. This is where I've landed. So, I want to hear from you. If you've spent any time in a classroom since 2020, as a teacher, a parent, a sub, whatever your seat is, where have you seen that same split? Where did structure hold and where did it fall apart? Drop it in the comments, friends. So this has been the Veteran Teacher Files. I'm the Dragon Lady. And if this series meant something for you, do me a favor. Subscribe, follow, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. I'll see you next time.